The emphasis of my talk today is on applying psychology to cyber deception. And one caveat here is this is going to take a sort of very different perspective to deception, and that in our work we are seeking to deceive people rather than to detect deception itself. So sort of flipping the process slightly there, I think, but it's a direction which is being taken in terms of cybersecurity as a measure that is needed to protect our computer networks from network attackers and network intruders. So just to begin with, to back up our approach really, so we've taken a definition of deception as deliberate measures to induce erroneous sense-making and subsequent behaviour within a target audience to achieve and exploit an advantage. So there it's very, very much focused around targeting other people. This work, a lot of this early stuff has come from approaches to military deception, essentially. And from some of our work, we can see that whilst some cyber deception technology, i.e. technology built to deceive people, arguably might meet this definition to an extent, the majority of this work looking at cyber deceptive technology, it's really contained within the computer network itself, and it fails to consider the full scope of the attack or defense service from the defender's cognitive processes to the attacker's cognitive processes. So that's a change that's really, really needed in this area to move beyond the technological aspects on it to actually start to deceive the attacker rather than just their cognitive processes. So a bit of background here and why we need to adapt to cyber deception. Current best practices for discovery of a computer network intruder is 100 days. This is really unacceptable. It opens up a whole range of attacks which can be done against a computer network, a huge amount of information that they can steal or bring in ransomware against a computer network or an organisation. This really, really needs to be challenged. However, organisations deploying deceptive technology can experience a 91% reduction in dwell time in their networks through various means of alerting administrators to unauthorized access. As I say, if intruders are able to gain a foothold in our network for 100 days, they can withdraw large amounts of information. The question here is, would this be acceptable in the physical world? Would somebody who goes into a building wanting to steal lots of stuff be allowed to be inside that building for 100 days? So why are we accepting it in the virtual world, and how can we better defend ourselves? So some of the earlier work here is referring to honeypots or honey technologies, which are sort of a simulated computer network, really. And these are often used as a form of deception in cybersecurity to deceive network intruders there. The honeypots are designed to lure attackers away from more valuable information through the use of decoys, and they usually perform some sort of trigger for an early warning of an attack there. And then defenders can use honeypots so they can see a network intruder in this deceptive network environment to understand their tactics, techniques, procedures, what sort of information they're looking to steal. However, honeypots do not really protect us against intruders already in our networks. Low interaction honeypots, i.e. really low forms of deceptive environments, can be easily spotted by experienced attackers, whilst high interaction honeypots are cost prohibited for a majority of organisations, even if they might be a lot more deceptive and able to manipulate an attacker. An analogy my colleagues use is that these are more of a guard tower on a perimeter fence when they're already inside the gates. And the argument here is that honeypots are this more sort of passive form of deception, and instead we need to be more offensive in our cyber deception efforts. Which brings us on to oppositional human factors. I'm not sure if anybody here has heard this term before, but this is an approach that's been taken by some colleagues who I've spoken with out in America, who've been seeking to bring together behavioural science and cyber deception research. So with oppositional human factors, it seeks to flip like the human factors, which makes the environment good, makes it easily accessible, but to flip it to make it so that they are not accessible. These approaches seek to disrupt attacker cognition and behaviour through increasing cognitive biases, like through a false environment. So, for example, it might bring in time deficiencies. It might let somebody go through a system, then suddenly the system stops working, even though an attacker is expecting it to work. All of these things might create stress, annoyance with the attacker, and reduces their efficiency, really. As I say, then an attacker might not be familiar with a computer network system, and they should not be expecting a system that has good usability or design. This creates a variety of opportunities for deception to target attacker decision making. So some of the more current research we've been doing is this move to what's been called active network defense, where attackers engage across the information landscape and the cognitive battle space. So some of the approaches we've been using here is design thinking, which has been used in software developments, and it's also been used in the development of military systems. So as part of this work, we brought together expertise from deception, computer science, software development to develop and create a series of solutions to the cyber deception issues. So trying to see if some of these things which are very much done in the physical world can be applied to cyberspace. So as I think one of the analogies we used is the Japanese castle defense, which is a sort of like a deceptive physical environment as somebody's trying to attack a network. So they might have to go up a set of stairs thinking they're at an entrance, but then they suddenly have to go down a set, things like that. So how could you start to apply this to a computer network to really start to interfere and confuse an attacker? So there's a lot of big questions coming up in that area at the moment, which brings me on to some of the potential ethical concerns of this area. Yeah, there's potentially a lot of ethics here. I mean, deception's generally neutral, but there's no real clear sort of ethical guideline of conducting actual deception against people. Within the UK, we can't do hackback because that's breach of Computer Misuse Act, so that's an immediate offence. And there's no perfidy either. So that's some potential limitations there. And is how can we, or even should we, ethically deceive intruders to stop cyber attacks? Is it acceptable to convince an attacker to download some false information, which actually has a logic bomb or a virus in it, which then destroys their computer system? And another question really is it okay to dox network intruders? If people aren't familiar with the word doxing, it could be like showing online information about them or showing their real world identity, so that somebody who's not secret, the whole world is now aware of them. I mean, they did it recently with the Revel ransomware group, where they essentially showed who the main actors in that group were. So the group admin immediately panicked and resigned and just abandoned their organised crime group. But the question there is, do intruders actually care if they are doxed? We know from some recent circumstances that some people were in countries outside of our jurisdictions who don't care. So it might not actually affect them so much if we do reveal information about them that they want hidden. So these are some of the questions I'm pondering at the moment, and any advice on these would be quite welcome as to whether it's ethical to deceive or not. I mean, I'm putting together some work at the moment there. So it would be quite interesting to see what other people's views are on this area. As I say, it's very sort of different to the usual deception work, but I think it's an area which is very much growing. I mean, I was speaking with a CISO of a company recently, and they're going to be introducing all sorts of stuff like this to defend their computer networks against attackers, to prevent loss of IPR or ransomware, loss of money. Okay, and there are some references for you all, and I'm happy to share those. And does anybody have any questions for me? I mean, I'm aware this is a very brief overview of what's going to be a very interesting area and quite complicated at the moment.